Kevork Mourad, thank you for being with us here at the Museum of the Institute of the Arab World, where we have the chance to display one big, very gorgeous installation you made. And I would like you to say a bit of your inspiration for the realization of this tremendous installation.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in an amazing institution like this. And when I saw this piece here, I was very honored and moved to be between history, between very powerful pieces, starting from, works from Palmyre, end up, with works with doigt. So it's kind of my work, the way I think about it, it's part of the history, and at the same time when I saw in the exhibition, it kind of showed me that artwork is important to be part of history. So I was born in Syria from Armenian descent, Aleppo, and I always wanted to kind of illustrate and create things related to music and storytelling. So my parents or my ancestors told me something, I would have loved to kind of create that story. So with time, I realized it's possible to recreate worlds, to rebuild worlds, especially world that we're losing. World could be oral history, like our ancestors told us some stories and then we lost. It means we need to recreate it, to be able to relive these things, or places like Palmyre or Aleppo Souk was destroyed, we need to recreate it artistically. So the reason for this approach, I think we need to inspire people. We need to kind of create this hope in people where people can just put positive things in the future and create this peaceful future. So to go back to this piece, I have it here, time immemorial. I started thinking, I want to rebuild the lost city of Ani. It's a medieval city. It had 1,700 churches. And when you look at it today, when you search on Google or anywhere else, there's nothing. And you told me that you've been there. It's interesting for me that,
20 years ago, precisely.
Amazing, because it's somehow, I feel that you could understand why I wanted to create this. Because if you look at a piece like this, it's inventive piece. So this piece...
No, it's very interesting because it's on 3 layers.
Yes.
And it's like going through time.
Exactly, exactly. I was just going to say, when I first started thinking about creating lost places like Palmyre or destroyed places in Aleppo, I wanted to create work when I face the work to the audience and the audience think about time. Mm-hmm. So you could revisit time almost like chapters in history. So you're looking at the work from the side, you could peel the work and choose if you want this slice of time or this slice of time or this slice of time. When you're facing the work, you can see the time linear.
Yeah. This work is painted or drawn on muslin.
Yes.
Why is this choice in particular?
I was invited to be part of a very interesting group show in Armenia. It was organized by Italian business people to kind of bring art from outside and support from outside to help the economy of Armenia. So they invited 58 artists from around the world.
All from an Armenian background or not?
No. There were only maybe 7 to 8 Armenian background. The rest was all international artists. One of them was Imran Qureshi, was also invited there. So I was there and I asked them to provide me all the materials. They did. And I went to look for the paper. No paper. So I was in a kind of a desperate and emergent situation. What to do? What's the next step? I have only 6 days to make this piece. I went to the local fabric store. I said, what do you have white material to use, white fabric? And the woman said, I only have this. And I touched. It was very tightly woven fabric. And it had almost a paper quality. I said, okay, I'm risking it. I got the fabric and I started working on it. I was worried that because the paper, it's stiffer. When you cut the paper, you don't have to worry about some angles. It stays straight.
Yeah.
So the fabric, it folds. Yes. But the paper has challenges because when you open, has its roll. When you're hanging it, it always curls outward or inward. So when I did this, my first experiment on muslin, I was very satisfied in many ways. First of all, I don't have to worry about the fragility of the paper, about the artwork. Second, yes. And second, many people say, is it archival? It's archival, it's 100% cotton. And then the most important thing, we have, as an artist, you know, we all were worried about where do you store your work? Once you do on paper, you have to live with this big roll. This one, you can fold it, put it in your closet.
It was delivered in a suitcase, by the way.
So you can just open it and steam it or iron it and hang it. So now I choose to work only on muslin. Even though I have paper, I don't want to use paper on larger scale things. And the work in a three-dimensional way, it flatters the paper to the fabric, because once you move next to fabric, the wind also plays a big role, which I want that to be part of it. Because in one interesting philosophy I have in works like this, they're all suspended. When they're suspended and hung with ropes, it gives you the sense of migration. You're taking with you all this to the new place. Nowadays, many people are migrating in different reasons. So what do they take with them? They have to take with them all these memories and wealth of this culture. And when you create a work like this and hung and with rope, it feels like there's sails, almost like a boat moving. So when someone is walking next to it, you sense that kind of ethereal, or like this sense of fluidity and flying through the wind or sailing to the next place.
And you had told me you have developed a specific technique of drawing to realize this kind of work, associating in one hand both ink and the brush.
Yes. So with time, when I started creating the idea of performance, because I do lots of performances, it's time-based. So I invented many years ago, like around 20 years ago, it's a tube. I squeeze the paint out of it. While the paint is wet, I smear it. So if it's in a small surface, I do it with hand, just smear it. I use non-toxic materials, a water base. But when I started doing it on canvases, on large surfaces like paper, it has a texture. It will hurt your skin if you do it very much. So I decided I need to use a very soft varnish brush. So just like to hit that, and it gives this sense of almost print.
No, it's very impressive when we see you at work.
Thank you. And because I have, when I went to art school in Armenia, I learned many different varieties of printmaking there. And I love the look of the prints. When you look at prints, it has this kind of historic look to it. It's kind of aged, almost like the nature aged it. And when I use the technique like what I'm doing now, it gives sense of printing, almost like it's a wood block or any kind of, it feels like it's carved on a material and printed. But I added on top of that, because it's a large scale work, I added the monotype element. So what I do, I create the work on acetate, and while it's wet, I press it on the fabric, on the muslin. After it dries, I do the details with the technique of the squeezing the paint and hitting with the brush, holding it with one hand. It took me a very long time to hold it, because you're using several muscles together.
Having two tools in the same hand is not easy to work with.
The reason I decided to do that, because the paint dries almost in 5 seconds. So you have only 5 seconds to use the brush to move the paint left or right. So if you do it by the time you take the brush and do this takes very long time, especially if you're doing a large scale work. It doesn't work. It's not practical to do the line and leave it down and take it another you know.
Yeah.
So kept it together, almost like the brush is shielding the squeezer. So I squeeze it, brush. So it stays almost like if you look at it from distance, it feels like the brush is kind of spitting all this paint out.
Yes.
It has this magical element. Where is this paint coming out? Because the brush is there, the paint is hidden underneath.
There's a kind of magic in the way of doing it.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Kevork,
It's my
for
pleasure.
all these details.